Welcome to One Quick Question with Infomedia, your source for answers to your questions about websites, digital marketing, and more. I'm your host, Carrie Rollwagon, and today I'm here with our producer, Alana Harmond.
Hi.
All right, so you're on the podcast today to talk about Lightroom, which is an app, a photo editing app.
Yes.
And you use it. Do you use it for personal, business, both? What do you use it for?
A little bit of both. I started originally using it because I wanted to learn a little bit more about editing photos, and I actually knew of some people that I followed on Instagram that were selling Lightroom presets, and so you had to have Lightroom in order to be able to use those, and we can talk more about that in a few minutes, but Lightroom does make it very easy to use presets and just do basic edits on photos, and then I do run our social media at Infomedia, so anything that is taken with my iPhone that wasn't like a photo that came through our media team that was professionally, shot and edited, I do use Lightroom just to kind of make those look consistent with our other ones.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, so can you tell me what a preset is?
Yeah, so
I didn't wait a few minutes.
No, it's fine. A preset, and I'll try to think of the best way to explain this because I don't know all the technical terms. I'm really not a professional photographer at all. But it is basically like a set of edits that you can save. So if it's like a combination of like changing the exposure to a certain level and the contrast to a certain level or whatever, and then you can change the colors. Basically, you can save that, and so it'll apply all of those edits in one click to your photo.
So is it kind of like when Instagram first started, they had like a filter or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
Is it kind of like that, but not as cheesy?
It is. It is pretty much exactly like that, but you can also, it is a lot more specific and intuitive than Instagram's, but it gives you the same ability to edit. Like if you put the preset on and it turned the photo way too dark or something like that, then you could still just edit the exposure or whatever you needed to do, and like only edit that one thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So what are how difficult is this to learn? Was this to learn to use?
For me, it wasn't super difficult. I had a little bit of basic photography knowledge before I used Lightroom. And so I knew just a little bit about what the basic editing features were. But I actually took a Skillshare class on Lightroom. I use Lightroom on my phone, which is another thing to note. Like the mobile version of Lightroom is very intuitive. It's super easy to use. And so I took a Skillshare class just to learn, more about it and more of the specifics. And that was super helpful for me.
Okay. So if people were, I guess, how does this differ from Photoshop? Because I think people have heard of Photoshop, and it sounds like a lot of what you're saying Lightroom does is kind of what some people think Photoshop does, and maybe it does. Do you know what the differences are, or is that?
I am not the best person to speak to this, but we actually have Paul in the room.
Okay.
He's our director of photography, and he's videographer.
So Paul is usually, I feel like we should say, is usually sitting in the corner of the studio, making sure our levels are okay and that we look okay. And normally we don't make you be on camera, so
it's
sorry.
Fine.
You're usually behind the camera.
Yeah.
Correct.
That's where I like to be.
Yeah. So Paul is a videographer and sometimes photographer for us. Can we say that? Yeah. So you probably used Photoshop and Lightroom quite a bit.
Yes, I do use Photoshop and Lightroom a lot.
So what's the difference?
So the difference is Lightroom is a product, they've both been around for a long time. Lightroom is a great product for doing edits, basic edits to color, to contrast, to anything that you can do to a photograph that isn't heavy duty manipulation. So like a common workflow for me, like if I go out and I do a bunch of headshots and some group shots, it's almost never do you get everybody not blinking or looking in the right direction or something. So I'll do all of the color and contrast edits in Lightroom. I'll bounce 2 photos over to Photoshop if I need to swap ahead.
Yeah.
Because
Whoa. Yeah.
And
I feel like in wedding photography
all the time.
It's always like, my grandpa wasn't actually
Yep.
here, but I want to put his head on someone's body. It's like, oh, cool, that's normal.
I actually got my start in the wedding world, and so
Mhm.
you would get those requests sometimes, and it almost never really works the way that they want it to, because like you're not the one taking the photo of grandpa, and
Yeah.
it's like taking an iPhone shot of a photo on the wall or something.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, fine. But it
This
is
is
really
from World War II.
Yeah,
but-
exactly. So, but same thing. Like you take
Mhm.
these big group shots, and you always have to swap somebody, like because they're blinking or
Yeah.
they're looking in the wrong direction, or the
Mhm.
dog's like in the wrong place or whatever.
Yeah.
And so Photoshop is awesome for doing those kind of manipulations.
Yeah.
And then you bounce it back to Lightroom to do final edits.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But also for what Elena's using it for social media,
Mhm.
or somebody who maybe does what we do, which is a mix of, like, normally our photos on our social media are coming from our media department a lot of times. But then something will happen in the moment, and if Elena catches that, she doesn't have time to book you guys. You know, if you're on a shoot,
Mhm.
she's going to just get it with her phone. So then she's going to do a quick edit. So Lightroom would make way more sense for her than Photoshop, right?
Oh yeah, definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. Lightroom is actually like, I don't want to make it sound like Lightroom is less of a powerful tool. Lightroom is an incredibly powerful tool, and it can be a little bit intimidating when you open it up for the first time.
Yeah.
There's a lot of menus, there's a lot of buttons to push, but it's very, very powerful. And Adobe has actually been updating it to include artificial intelligence that will, like, you can click select subject, and it just automatically selects the subject. You can make them brighter or darker than the background. You can do all these really smart manipulations, just as long as you're not trying to move objects around.
Yeah. So if somebody's starting out, like, do you think they should start with Photoshop or start with Lightroom, or does it matter? Does it just depend on what they're doing?
Yeah, it's just different tools.
Okay.
I would never try, like, if I come back from a photo shoot for one of Infomedia's clients, I might have 400 to 900 images from a big shoot, something like that. That would be impossible in Photoshop. I would never try to edit
Yeah. It
900
would be like the
photos
rest
in,
of the year.
Yeah, the rest
Yeah.
of the year. Lightroom is just a much better tool for doing a lot of images.
Okay. So can you do, like, this applies to all these images? Like,
Oh yeah,
make
mhm.
it, okay.
Yeah, if I'm shooting in the same room and like
Mhm.
I'm there for an hour, I can adjust one image and just sync those changes across all of them.
Cool.
I don't know if it's something that is unique to the mobile version, but one thing that I do is, like, there's a button, I think it's like apply from previous, and it's pretty much it, like, copies and paste your edits from the previous photo that you had clicked on. So sometimes if I'm taking photos around the office, and, like, for example, I took a few in the conference room, which is really well lit. It's very natural light. Okay, well, then I also took a few photos in the library, which is just lit with fluorescence, and there's no windows in that room.
Mhm.
I would use, I would edit one photo from the conference room, make it look how I want it, and then copy that edit, or just, put it on all of the other photos from the conference room. And then you can just kind of make minor edits on each of those.
Yeah. And then the same thing in the library, you would do a different thing because it's
Yeah,
different lighting.
yeah. And what Paul said, I think earlier when you asked me if it was, like, hard to learn, I didn't really think about it, but I've actually been using it for, like, years now. So I will say the Skillshare class, or even if you just look up, like, a YouTube video of, like, basic Lightroom techniques, like basic Lightroom edits to do on photos, that will probably be really helpful. It is a little overwhelming at first with all the different buttons, but once you know what's what, and like where it's located in the app, they don't really change it. So
Sweet. And then you just export it and use it on your blog or social or wherever you want to use it. Right? All right. Well, cool. Thank you both. Thanks,
Yeah.
Paul, for
Thanks, Paul.
coming out of the shadows.
You're very welcome.
All right. Well, one quick question is brought to you by Infomedia.
Carrie is the host and creator.
Alana is the producer. Our theme music is by Brad Davis, and our sound engineering, as you know from the beginning of this episode, is done here in Infomedia Studios by Paul, who sometimes we bring in as, like, a phone a friend. Or now we do.
Find show notes for anything we talked about today, or find out what Infomedia can do for your website at infomedia.com/quick-question.
And we'll leave you with this thought. A real expert helps to clarify, not confuse, so don't take website advice from someone who can't give you a straight answer.